Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and we have our good buddy, John Mittendorf, in the house with us today. He's a researcher and apologist, works with Answers in Genesis and writes his own books, leaps tall buildings, outruns locomotives. Anyway, of all the things we've done, and John, you've been here for quite a few years working with us, and people really, really appreciate the perspective you bring on things. But this is one of the most fascinating books. You have got to have this for your library. And we're going to give one of these away. It's called Ancient Technology. And when I first went through this book, I go, really? It just changed my whole brain, because it's just fascinating. And you got it. How smart were the people back in pyramid days? How smart were they?
Well, and you know, Perry, on this subject, I don't want to get away from the biblical implications of this, because it's easy to go, well, you know, the pyramids are there, yeah, everybody knows it, yeah, I'm familiar with that, I'm familiar with Stonehenge, and people go, you know, I always wondered how they did that. So it's easy to get wrapped up in the secular side of that. But there's also the biblical side, which is the foundation of it. And the biblical foundation is, if God created Adam and Eve smart, and he did, in the image of God, and you go 1,650 years till the flood, everybody spoke the same language, the average age was 912 years, you would think that technology and wisdom and intelligence would have significantly increased, which it did. So, out of that then, should we be able to go back in time? The pyramids were built 2,600 years before Christ. Should we see evidence of advanced technology, some of which is beyond what we can do today?
Well, that's what this little book's about. We're going to give this book away at the end of the program, so be listening coming up here. But we want to get into one of the topics that has just absolutely fascinated me, but a lot of you are fascinated by it as well, and that is the pyramids. By the way, we had a story over the week about King Tut. They found some more of his things, and a lot of people think, well, he's buried in the pyramids.
Nope. Dr. Mark Lanier, he's the respected American Egyptologist, has said that they have never found any pharaoh in any pyramid. The pyramids were not built to bury pharaohs. The pharaohs are all buried in the Valley of the Kings, not the pyramids. So then the next question is, okay, what did they build the pyramids for?
Right.
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question.
I'm glad I did too.
So last month when you were gone, Steve and I started off on this, and we created a major problem in that. By the way, it was really fun doing it with Steve, because as I went through the pyramid, I said, they did this, they did that, and Steve would go, yeah, I've been there, I've watched that, I've looked at that, that's exactly right. And so Steve has been inside the pyramid, and you know, what you can do today, but we created a problem in that. When we got done talking about how it's put together, I said, now let's talk about how they operated it. And Steve goes, well, we're out of time. See you next month. So, and so people, the past 3 or 4 weeks go, really nice, you left us hanging, you know. Okay, so I see what it is, you know, how they do it. So why don't we go back and just do a real quick review, and then let's talk about how it's perceived that they were operating. And you have to tighten your seatbelt on this one, because you're thinking, wait a minute, a simple farming community in the Valley of the Nile was doing this? Yeah, they were. They were, yeah. So if I can have figure number 1 up on the screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the giant Pyramid of Cheops, which is about 500 feet tall. And there's a couple things that we know about this, Perry. Number 1, as we just mentioned, no Egyptian pharaoh has ever been found in any pyramid. None. They're all found in Valley of the Kings. Secondly, it's clearly obvious, once we get into this, that their technology in some cases surpasses the technology that we have today. And that bends a lot of minds.
That does.
That bends a lot of minds. So if I can have figure number 2, and figure number 2 is what we went over last month just briefly. And the notes, by the way, why don't you hold the notes up just for a minute. These are available. It's about 24 pages long, and it's get those at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com, and this is like 24 pages on this particular topic.
Yeah. So let's have that figure again. And if you look inside the pyramid, you'll notice that there's a lot of different elements inside the pyramid. And just looking at it, the pyramid is made out of limestone, except the parts that are labeled inside the pyramid. Those are made basically out of red granite, specifically, which I'll explain in just a minute. Okay? Now, you will notice that in the pyramid there was several interesting looking things. So let's go to the next figure, which would be figure number 3. This is called the Grand Gallery. And what's interesting about this, Perry, this is almost 29 feet high, which is 3 stories, and this goes up to what's called the King's Chamber. If you look very, very closely at either side of the walkway, which has been put in recently, you'll notice there's shelves and there's slots in the shelves. Can you see the slots?
Yes, I can.
Okay. There's 27 pairs of slots that are equidistant all the way up the Grand Gallery. If you go up 2 blocks on the side, there is also a hole in the side that was used to accept something that was anchored in the slots. Okay? I'll explain that once we get to the operation of the pyramid. All right? Now, as you went up the Grand Gallery, then the Grand Gallery came into, can I have figure 4, please? The Grand Gallery is to the right, and if people are just listening, what you have is a large chamber that goes up to the pyramid at about a 26-degree angle, and then it levels off and it goes into what's called an antechamber. Inside the antechamber are 3 large stones that can be raised or lowered. Okay?
Wow.
All right. Then you go into the what's called, and I call it the King's Chamber complex because there's various parts to it. Notice on the very bottom of the floor how the entire complex sits on what's classified as an egg crate. You will notice that the blocks on the side of the King's Chamber is the pyramid, but the King's Chamber is separate from the pyramid. So in other words, the entire King's Chamber complex is separate from the pyramid, and the bottom of it sits on an egg crate. So in other words, it's isolated from the pyramid. Why would they do that?
I don't know. You're the guy that tells me why.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, let's go back to that figure just for a minute. You will also notice that in the middle of the King's, what's called the King's Chamber sarcophagus, that's supposedly what he was supposed to be buried in. But when you go above that, there's 5 rows of beams. Each beam weighs 70 tons, and there's a total of 43 beams. 43 beams of 70 tons each. All of the beams and all of the King's Chamber complex is made out of red granite shipped from Aswan 500 miles away. Why would you do that specifically inside the pyramid?
Why, John?
I'm so glad you asked me that question.
I don't know. Well, I'm your fan. I'm your student. Teach me.
Here's the bottom line.
Right.
Is the red granite that they've used, they know that it has at least a 55% constituency of quartz inside. Quartz has the ability, it's called the piezoelectric effect, that a mechanical vibration, in other words, if you vibrate it, it will change mechanical vibrations into electricity. Science knows that. It's called a piezoelectric effect.
Wow.
Okay? Are you starting to see what's happening
well,
here?
Yeah, I have a glimpse of this. I'm just fascinated by it.
Well, it's awesome.
Now think about this, folks. You got a pyramid out there in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the core inside this pyramid is this stone that came 500 miles away.
500 miles away, right?
So they were up to something. They just weren't building a pyramid.
Yeah, they just didn't build a pyramid out of 100% limestone block. Oh, no. That's by the way, there's 2.3 million blocks of stone in a pyramid. You could build a wall 3 feet high, 1 foot wide across the United States and back again. Wow. To give you an idea of the size of this thing. So, if we can go back to figure 4 just for a minute, and you'll notice in the King's Chamber complex, in what's called the King's Chamber is the sarcophagus, or the coffer. That's supposedly where the pharaoh was supposed to be buried, but of course he never did. Now let's go to figure 5. That is the sarcophagus, Perry, and that is the King's Chamber. That is all red granite. Now, if what we've been talking about stretches your mind, I'm going to stretch your mind even a little bit further. The sarcophagus that you saw in that picture was made out of a piece of red granite, solid, that weighed 70 tons. The next question would be, okay, how did they hewn out the inside of the sarcophagus? So if you were going to bury a pharaoh there, you could have buried the pharaoh inside the sarcophagus. If I can have figure 6, and you better tighten your seatbelt on this one. They know that the Egyptians used what's called trepanning. And trepanning means that you drill a hole down into something with a hollow core drill. And the hollow core drill will leave the cone inside the hollow core drill. The Egyptians were using an 18-inch hollow core drill. They know that because in the sarcophagus, they over-drilled a couple holes and then tried to polish them out. But they didn't polish them out all the way. And what they would do is, if you look at the drawing, you see all those circles. What they would do is they would take the drill and they would drill all these holes, and then they would come in and they would break off the cores that are left, and then they machine the inside of the sarcophagus so it's perfectly flat. Are you with me so far?
Well, I'm just fascinated by it.
Okay, well now, they know from the graveyard, from the stone and stuff that's outside of the pyramid. In other words, the old stone they didn't use, they just dumped it in the graveyard outside the pyramid. They have thousands and thousands of these cones that are left over from all this drilling. They can look at the side, and I have a picture in the notes. We're not showing a picture today, but I have in the notes a picture of the cones, and they have circles on them. And a circle is, as the drill goes into the granite, it will leave grooves on it. And what they do is they measure the difference between the grooves, and they can tell how fast the feed rate of the drill is into the granite.
Of course.
Okay?
And, okay.
The Egyptians' feed rate, 2,600 years before Christ, was 500 times faster than what we do today.
In an RPM.
In an RPM.
Okay.
If you can get your mind around that, you have to ask yourself, what kind of machinery or what kind of technology were they using to do that, but what kind of power source did they have to be able to do 500 times faster than we do today? In fact, people that have studied this have gone to 4 granite manufacturers in this country and said, if I was to have you build me a sarcophagus and give them the dimensions, how would you do it for me? They said, well, no problem. We would give you 5 pieces, the 4 sides and the bottom, ship it to the job site, and bolt it together. And they go, no. The Egyptians took a solid 70-ton piece of granite and hewn out the inside to perfect vertical and horizontal dimensions. And their answer was, that's impossible.
All right, got to take a break here. It does leave a question.
Yep.
How did they make the first pyramid?
Okay.
In other words, if the pyramids were some source of energy
Right.
to do this work with, how did they cut the first one to be so perfect?
Okay.
We'll be right back with John Mittendorf. By the way, His People Rejoice.
Good question.
HisPeopleRejoice.com and is where you can get the notes. And stick around. We're giving away this book in just a few moments.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back. We're with John Mittendorf. We're talking about the advanced technology of the Egyptian pyramids and what they really are. By the way, all of these notes, and this, look, folks, you can't get this information anywhere else. This is fabulous, and he's put it in a file. And you just go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com, and he will forward you this file. And it's just saying, you know, here it is, free. Share it with yourself and your friends. And get it. We're talking about what's going on really inside these pyramids. It's absolutely fascinating. They used the capacity of their brains to do something that we're still scratching our heads about. But we do know that there's different types of stone inside these pyramids for a reason.
For a reason.
And you've brought us to the inner chambers. Something's going on in there.
Okay, now let's talk about, we talked about what they did, we know. Yeah. Now let's talk about how it's theorized, how they were using it, the purpose of the pyramid. So this is what we know, Perry, that the Earth's core is a circulating mass of molten metal, which is iron-nickel alloy. And we're pretty sure of that. That generates an electromagnetic field that produces a frequency, and it's called the Schumann resonance. So what that means then is, if I can take something and use the vibrations from the Earth and change the vibrations into electricity, I have a renewable, long-lasting source of free energy. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Theoretically, yes.
Well, it's more than theoretically. Okay, so here we go. They also know that the pyramid was precisely positioned at the center of the Earth's landmass, at the exact center. They also know that if you take something that has a frequency and there's something next to it, if it has the same frequency, it's called the couple oscillator, that as one thing vibrates, the other thing will start to vibrate also. And you probably remember the collapse of the Tacoma's Bridge, the Narrows. When I was in the Air Force, we were taught that when you march across a bridge, you march out of step. You break your step. Everybody doesn't march in step. And that's called resonant frequency. Theoretically, you can take a 3-story building, and if I had a generator with enough power and I knew what the frequency of that building was, if that generator was able to generate the power of the right frequency, the building would collapse. Of course, you don't have that much power and you don't know what the exact frequency is. But scientifically, that is accurate. So it appears then that the pyramid was a harmonic receiver of resonant vibration frequencies from the Earth.
It's fascinating because the next question that comes, I don't know if we have time to get into it, but how did they know that that vibration and frequency was there?
Well, you know, it's interesting that the American Indians knew it because a lot of the American Indian flutes were tuned to the F-sharp chord, which is 438 cycles per second. That's the frequency of the Earth. 438 cycles per second, F-sharp chord. So the American Indians knew it, so the Egyptians knew it also. Okay, now let's keep going. Usable energy. We know that the inside of the pyramid, the King's Chamber complex, was completely constructed of red granite and contained at least 55% crystal, correct? We know that through the piezoelectric effect, that as the Earth's vibrations would flow through the pyramid, and it was positioned exactly at the center of the Earth's landmass, that the vibrations would pass through the pyramid, and of course the red granite inside would start to vibrate, and through the piezoelectric effect would change the vibrations into a microwave type of energy, or electrical energy. Are you with me on that one so far?
Now I know why they're shaped the way they're shaped. No, it makes sense. You capture it and harness it. Yeah.
Now I'm going to raise the bar. Let's go to figure 7, please, and let's leave this figure up for just a couple of minutes. Remember we talked about, we went up the Grand Gallery, there was a shelf on either side, and there was slots up the shelf, and there was also holes above the shelves all the way up the Grand Gallery. By the way, the Grand Gallery is also shaped so as you start from the bottom, that the stones, as they were stacked up, they're corbelled. In other words, they overlap each other, so as you go up the Grand Gallery, it gets narrower and narrower, and then as you go towards the end, before it went into the antechamber, it also narrowed down. So it was like a funnel. Jet engine, as you go towards the end, it narrows down, so it increases the thrust, right? What they think was happening was, let's go back to figure 7, that in those slots was a wooden post that was anchored in the bottom and was then anchored to the side, which you see the pin locator. And this is a little technical, Perry. But what they believe is that they were using between the wooden slots what's called a Helmholtz Resonator. And it's nothing more than a sphere that has a hole in it that's 1/5 to 1/10 the size of the inside of the sphere. And what that does is that takes a vibration. You'll notice there's a tuning fork in front of each sphere. As the tuning fork would vibrate, the sphere will pick it up, that's called a Helmholtz Resonator, and will amplify the sound wave. So what you had for the entire length of the Grand Gallery was an amplification system to amplify the sound waves as they came up the Grand Gallery before it went into the King's Chamber.
So they were harnessing what?
They were harnessing the vibrations and they were amplifying them.
Wow.
It's an amplification system. Now, why do they believe that? Because in the step pyramid of Zoser, they found 30,000 spheres which look very much like a Helmholtz Resonator. Everything in there was ripped out, of course, when the original Tomb Raiders went into the pyramid. Of course, they ripped everything out so they could get up into it. So all that's gone. This is all theorized, but the evidence is somewhat strong. Okay? Now, so what you have is an amplification system. So, as the sound waves went up the Grand Gallery into the antechamber, remember you had the 3 stones that could be raised or lowered. You could raise or lower those to tune the frequencies going into the King's Chamber. As the frequencies went into the King's Chamber, now you had all those red beams. The entire King's Chamber and the red beams will now start to oscillate red granite, which changes the vibration of the Earth, which has been amplified, and changes it from vibrations into what?
Electricity.
Electricity. Microwave electricity.
Wow.
Okay?
How much? A lot.
Well,
not your everyday 400 amp system.
There's one thing that we don't know, because over the years, the original picture that I showed you, the pyramid, the outside of the pyramid has been stripped of all the stone. The Ottomans and the Romans, and they stripped all the stone off. So the outside of the pyramid has been destroyed. Now, there's the pyramid right there. Now, how they got it outside the pyramid or what they did with it, nobody knows, because the outside of the pyramid's been basically destroyed. So, but we know what's still left inside the pyramid, see? Now, let me finish up and talk about one more thing they were doing, and if you thought what we've talked about so far is outside the box, we're going to go way outside the box.
Okay.
Inside the pyramid, with all of this stuff that's operating, you would have had atmospheric air. Atmospheric air is very inconsistent. Hot, dry, humid, not humid. And atmospheric air cannot be depended on to be the same today as it is tomorrow was yesterday. There is one gas in the universe that is very, very common and very, very simple, and that's hydrogen. Hydrogen is the simplest gas because it has one atom, one electron, one proton. So if you were to fill the inside of the pyramid with hydrogen gas, you would have a stable element. Hydrogen gas is also responsible for emitting microwave energy in the universe. Are you starting to see where I'm going with this?
Fascinating.
Yeah. So down below, let me see if I have a picture. Yeah. Can I have the guys bring up figure 9 for me, please? There's a picture of the pyramid. You'll notice there's the king's chamber with the grand gallery talked about. Below that, you'll see what looks like a little house. That's called the queen's chamber. And you'll notice there are two looks like vents or passageways that come out of the queen's chamber, but they do not go to the outside of the pyramid. They stop short.
Oh, the two and the kings do.
The kings do.
Yeah.
The queens don't.
Okay.
The king's chamber is where this was, the vibrations return electricity, and that's how they got it out of there. Now, what they did with it outside, we don't know because everything is gone. But the queen's chamber, you say, okay, how are we going to get hydrogen inside the pyramid? Well, easy. What you do is you take a solution of hydrated zinc chloride and a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid, and you have hydrogen. How'd they do that?
Oh, where'd they get it?
The south shaft that came out of the queen's chamber was filled with a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid, and the shaft that came out, the northern shaft that came out of the queen's chamber, was filled with hydrated zinc chloride. There's your hydrogen inside the pyramid.
Where'd they get it?
How'd they know that?
Yeah.
Okay, this is how they know that. The byproduct of that chemical reaction is salt. When they started to investigate the inside of the pyramid, the inside of the queen's chamber and the channel that went to the grand gallery were encrusted in salt. Okay?
That's fascinating.
Plus, you have the stains. Now, here's one more. Can I have figure 10 brought up?
Yeah.
And this comes out of the National Geographic Channel. When they commissioned a guy named Gattenbrink to design a rover to go up in these little passageways to see what was in there. On both the passageways out of the Queen's Chamber, when the rover went up, it goes up and it came to this device right here, which today is called Gattenbrink's door. And that is a block that is in the channel. And in the block, there are two copper electrodes in the block that are suspended in an asphalt tar. In other words, an insulator. What they believe is that each shaft, one shaft was filled with hydrated zinc chloride, the other shaft was filled with dilute solution of hydrochloric acid. As the acid would have been on the copper, they would have known what the level of the acid was inside the chamber. As the level dropped down, the two electrodes would have come not engrossed in the liquid. They'd have known it was time to refill the chamber. Yeah, what it's called is well, they're copper fittings, and it's called a fluid switch is what it's called.
Well, that's left a lot of people scratching their heads.
Yeah, are you with me on that one?
Well, I am, but I just, it's amazing. And now, the bottom line is, let's skip ahead and come back before we end up here.
Okay.
So how did they harness the energy and use it?
They don't know. That is a major question. And when I say, okay, they were taking a 70-ton block, solid block of granite, and hewing out the inside to perfect dimensions with 18-inch tube drills that were far faster and more powerful than what we use today. What power source were they using to do that? We have no idea. And is it possible that they were using some type of a technology, some type of machinery that we're totally unaware of today. Possible.
Because out of this
we don't know.
Some kind of a laser system.
It's possible. Some type of a laser system, some type of a microwave energy that they use to power their equipment. How do you cut 2.3 million blocks for one pyramid, and there's 108 pyramids in Egypt. How do you cut 2.8 million blocks and cut it to 10 to 15 thousandths an inch per block? Every block. How do you do that?
I don't know.
See, we're talking about something that's totally beyond the technology, the knowledge that we have today.
All right, folks, these notes are available. John has done the homework for you. By the way, if you want him to come to your group and lecture on these things, you can contact him through hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. If you go there, he'll send you the PDF file of this, and you can download it and copy it. It's our way of just giving it to you and share it with your family and friends. All right, we have a book here to give away. This is one of my favorite books. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. All the stuff we talked about. Did they fly?
Did they fly?
Did they fly? Okay. Anyway, caller number 4 at 541-776-5368. Caller number 4 wins the book. John, quickly, what are we doing
next month? We're going to start a series. We're going to cover church leadership principles. And then how about apply that to vote? When you go to vote, how do you vote? How do you apply Christian principles to voting?
Yeah.
And then how about worship? What is real worship in the church?
How about Christian principles to just overall leadership?
We can do that. Are they applicable to the church and to us today?
They better be.
They better be, yeah. Are they?
No. All right, thanks, John.
You bet.
We'll be right back.